Recording.
I am now.
Okay.
So I'm looking again, kind of gauging the way the light's hitting my paper to see how wet it is. It still looks relatively wet, so I'm gonna mix, I'm gonna use some yellow to go around where that sun is. Everything we're doing now is kind of underpainting, so don't worry about trying to get like specifically detailed. Just kind of think of it in those terms. We're going to come back with some of these same colors again. So I've got that yellow. I want to make it a little more intense. So I'm just going to go for more intense paint, less water. I want to also kind of keep in mind that I want this to reflect into the sand. So I'm going to do a little bit of that yellow down here where the sand and the beach would be. I also see it there on the water, on the ocean. I'm going to come now for orange. I'm not stressing about where the ocean is going to be too much, but I do want to, like, I know like the ocean color that I'm going to create is going to go over this paint, so don't worry about that. I'm just bringing this orange kind of in here where I see it. And I think I'm going to come, I'm noticing a couple places on my paper where it's dried a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of re-wet over here. And then I'm going to bring a little bit of kind of a reddish pink in there. So I just brought orange up in, like not intentionally. So I'm just taking my paper towel and kind of cleaning that up just a little bit. But now I'm going to touch on just a tiny bit of red in some of these places. I want to have just a very slightly more intense blue up top. So I'm going to kind of mix that up. I'm looking again to see how wet my paper is. I'm going to take my my larger brush and just kind of wet that whole top area again. Be careful as you do that because it'll pick up pigment and start to drag it down. So just kind of be conscious of that. I'm going to bring a little more intense pigment into where the reflection would be because it seems a little light to me.
Will you put her back there with Dad?
I'm mixing more.
No, you're good. Come on. Minnie. Okay.
I'm gonna bring also, just kind of as I'm looking at it, a little more intense orange at the underside of this yellow. So and we're done. I think this is great. I'm going to use the hair dryer on this.
Remember, you want it to be wet when you're painting.
So I'm studying the clouds right now. As I'm doing that, I had to kind of remind myself that to keep in mind like the lighter colors first. So there are like orange that fade into purples clouds like right around the sun, and so that's going to be kind of the next step. Because this is a, because it's a 5x7, I'm probably going to switch now to my fine liner brush. um, but yeah, that's how I'm thinking. I'm looking at the way those clouds come around the sun, and that's what I want to try to create next. um, I am starting to be a little more conscious, even though like it'll probably be one of the last things we paint, the horizon line. But I just want to be conscious of like where that lives in relationship to the sun and the clouds that we're going to get ready to start creating. Um, so yeah, so I'm going to start with kind of a orange that has. I'm going to put a little bit of red in it so that it'll kind of intensify a little more. This should be wet on dry that we're getting ready to do. And I'm just gonna kind of create some of those streaks. That's a little too, this is a little too solid. So I'm gonna add water to my brush. Just kind of creating those fine lines that I'm gonna do kind of around the sun here. And it's okay. So I had that like real intense pigment there at the start, and I'm just kind of using it on the paper to kind of blend it out. Um, yeah, I'm also, as I'm doing this, I'm just kind of thinking like I'm gonna come over like the outer edges of this orange are they kind of blend into a dark purple, almost gray. It's like a purple gray, I would say. But my mindset is that I'm gonna go over these outside edges, so I'm not gonna worry too much about um, fading them or blending them or any of those things that we've kind of done before. I'm gonna, on this left side, I'm gonna bring it all the way up to where my yellow is there. If you guys need me to lower the camera, just let me know, or if you want me to, I think I can do that. I'm just kind of following the horizon line, the one that I've kind of imagined, and there's like a little pink strip over here that I'm going to create. And I'm gonna, just for my own purposes, I'm gonna fade the top of this one. I want it to blend up just a little bit. We're going down the realism rabbit hole, I think.
Don't do it. So now I'm gonna mix up. I'm gonna mix up a kind of a slightly darker yellow. So I've got a little bit of orange with my yellow already. I'm just gonna mix a little bit darker, and I'm just gonna kind of come up here over the top and kind of create some space up there. Can I help you? I'm gonna blend some of that same. I'm gonna blend some of that same yellow into the orange that I've done, and I'm also gonna bring that yellow, that slightly tinted orange yellow, down around here, down around this, the reflection on the surface of the beach. When I do this one, I'm leaving it rough, kind of on the ends. I want it to be kind of streaky lines, and my thinking there is that's gonna start to, that'll feel more like reflection later when we come with some of the other layers that we're doing, the way that light kind of reflects on water. And now I'm going to start to mix up kind of a purple. So it's going to be more blue than red, this purple. And to start with, I want it to be real watered down. In fact, to kind of keep myself a little bit out of that realism rabbit hole, I'm going to come back over to my medium-sized brush um, to kind of play with these colors. Just looking to see what you guys can see. So I want it to be really nicely watered down for these first layers. I'm going to essentially come, so I'm going to come on either side of where I painted those orange streaks, and I'm just going to kind of lay down some of this. And my inclination is to blend the edge, but I'm not going to. I'm going to kind of leave just again some more like more of these cloud shapes that kind of come into that orange red. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So there's that part where the clouds are kind of touching the horizon line. I'm going to go ahead and I'm still not really worrying about where my horizon line's going to be. That's going to be darker than everything that I'm doing. So I'll be able to kind of create that later. I'm just kind of pulling these clouds to the edge of that orange. So even though we've already kind of done some underpainting, I'm going to view these cloud shapes that we're making as kind of another underpainting. What I mean when I say that is I'm gonna go over some of these purples with probably a darker purple still, and like down in this area here, I'm gonna define some clouds in there, or start to. Now I'm gonna come. I want to create like a blue gray because I'm gonna start to get into some of those clouds that are above where the sun is and above the space that we're working in right now. All right, so I'm gonna start to create some of those like larger, more prominent clouds that are kind of hovering kind of at about the center of the image. Um, I'm gonna start kind of over here. It feels real intense as I'm putting that there, but I'm gonna go with it. Um, yep. Just kind of bringing this all the way over. What I am gonna do, because it is a little bit intense, this color that I've got, is I'm gonna bring water onto this space that I've painted. Um, and that water is going to start to kind of fade it out just a little bit. I'm going to carry these kind of cloud shapes that I've started over. I'm going to bring that water onto it right now. So just touching water onto this where this wet paint is already kind of lightened it. And the other thing it's done is it's like pushing the pigment out to the edge, which makes it a little more cloud-like. Um, and I'm going to use the brush. I'm not going to go and get any more paint, but I'm going to use the brush I have to kind of create some of these wispy cloud shapes. I might feather out some of these edges, but I'm trying to be kind of random in the way these clouds are. I want to leave some of that light space behind just because it's such an important part of the image. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also paying attention to kind of how the clouds are kind of wispy. So I'm just kind of thinking in those lines, in those terms. I'm gonna go ahead and create that. I don't know if it's like a jet trail or whatever. Sometimes I've like some teaching artists that I've encountered. I've talked to before about, like you don't have to paint everything you see, which I think is valid a lot of times. But I also think there's something to trying to capture what you see there. It's just like a good practice, I think. So I'm gonna water down that intense color that I had. I'm just gonna make some more of these kind of wispy shapes up here. And keeping in mind, like my paintbrush is running out of the pigment, but I kind of like the way that, it's varying, which is such a big part of what these clouds are about, is how they're not just a solid color. Think about it too in terms of like layers. You'll be bringing layers onto this, so that's don't feel like, oh, it's all wrecked. I've just wrecked it. I would encourage you to. So like one thing that I'm doing is I am finding, like, occasionally I'm finding a specific place where it's like, okay, I want to try to recreate that cloud that I see there, or kind of close to that cloud that I see there. Consider doing that too. If you feel like you're getting bogged down in it and you're like unhappy with what you're seeing, do that thing where you kind of pull yourself back from the image and make a little photograph of it with your camera, and look at what your painting looks like through the lens of the camera. It'll kind of, like, because I'm feeling that right now, just a little bit of that, like, oh, I don't know if this is working. uh, but that's a lot of times when I'll take a picture with my phone, and looking at it on the screen of my phone helps me see, like, oh, it's okay. It's doing what I'm trying to do, or what my intention is, even if it doesn't seem like it. I'm coming down now into those purple spaces. I think they might be too wet. Yeah, they're still too wet to work. That area that I just did there in kind of the upper right corner is a little, it's too thick, I think. So I'm just using a clean brush, and I'm just going to kind of go over some of it and kind of blend that out just a little bit. So now I'm looking at some of the areas where I had started with these clouds, and I just want to make some of them a little bit darker. So I'm adding some of the kind of shade values within those cloud shapes that I see. There are a couple artists I follow who they just make amazing paintings of clouds. Like I just sometimes look at their work and I'm kind of in awe.
Hello.
This left side purple that I've got here, I'm going to come back in with some of this darker blue and just create a couple of lines that are kind of some separate clouds. I'm going to go over again that contrail, whatever that is. I'm still using the number 8, but I'm just going to create, just because I kind of see them in there, just some kind of fine line wispy clouds that just kind of creep across this image and kind of curl into the sky. My other side, the purple, I think is dry enough. I'm going to come back with that darker shade. I'm going to go over these darker clouds that I've created as well. Same thing, kind of the same mindset of like just creating those layers of shading. And then in some of these, in that like big collection of clouds in the middle, I'm gonna mix a color that would be mostly black, just a little bit of blue. Just to bring, like, again, kind of on the very bottom, just some of those more intense. I'm taking a picture with my phone so I can get a perspective on it. I would say, okay, I'm mostly happy with that. The only thing I want to change just from studying that is these three clouds on the bottom. They just look too similar to each other. Something's not right about that. So I'm just going to go over, I think probably just the very bottom section of it. I think I'm just going to use a clean brush that is wet but has most of the water kind of knocked off of it. And I'm just going to kind of blend right along that whole middle section there. So I'm kind of erasing it, but in doing that, I think that's going to help me feel okay about it. And again, this is that battle of like just trying to make it look so much like the image. I'm gonna use a hair dryer to get everything kind of dry before we move on. The next thing I think we'll work on is the ocean. How we're gonna kind of create that. So
Mhm.
So one thing I'm going to do now, and I've done this before where I've used, I think we may have done this before once, where I use tape to kind of let me have a real nice clean line. I'm not going to do that on this piece because I feel like this paper is pretty saturated, and when I would pull that tape up, it would potentially pull some of the paper. But I am going to kind of measure up from the bottom, and I'm going to use a kind of a pencil to create like a real fine line across
that that's going to be my horizon line. So, and I'm going to use the sun as kind of my guide for where I want this horizon line to live. So I've got, looks like an inch, 1 3/4 inches. You guys need that information too. So I'm just gonna make a mark on either side, and then I'll lightly draw that line, and that's gonna be, I'll just kind of use that to guide me for as far as painting just that initial horizon line. It's real light. And now I'm going to mix up a gray. It's going to have just a little bit of blue in it, but it's going to be mainly gray. It's very close to some of the grays that we've already used in our sky. Just needs to be a little bit darker than the clouds that are directly above it. If the reason I want to add a little bit of blue is it's not, the blue is there. The blue, just because the sky, the ocean generally looks the way it does because it's kind of reflecting what the sky looks like. So I just want to kind of keep that in mind, and I want to try to be conscious of like the areas in the ocean here that are white. So when I'm painting this line, I want to think about that. I also want to think about, I'm not going to paint some of the areas around where the sunlight is reflected in the ocean surface because I want that to stay kind of light the way it is. I was thinking while I was hair drying that I like the way this white space looks. I think that that reads really well as like a really bright sun. So, so I'm going to basically paint like a triangle shape where I'm going to actually turn my clipboard here so that I can try to paint as straight a line as possible.
Hey Nate,
Yeah.
is there a chance you could maximize the screen that the document camera is feeding to?
Oh yeah.
You know, like so that we don't, so it takes up more of my screen.
Full
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out, but I do want to kind of cover where this goes over. So I'm coming back for just a more intense uh, pigment, and I'm making sure that it's blue and black. And I'm just going to kind of, while this is still wet, I'm going to go directly over what's already there.
The other side, the right side, is a little bit trickier. I'm gonna do what we kind of mentioned earlier, where I'm gonna eliminate a lot of the complicated parts of that side, and I'm just gonna kind of make a similar decision over there. So I'm gonna use this dark color that I've mixed up, and I'm gonna kind of paint that line that I've drawn there, and then just kind of blend it down just a little bit, kind of in a, and again, it's kind of in a wedge shape. It's important to notice too, like most of the bottom of this image is really dark. Um, I think I'm kind of being, because I want to create some of those white waves that exist there. I think that's the main thing that's kind of tripping my brain up a little bit as I'm thinking about it. But like almost all of this space, I'm gonna go ahead and like this other side where the actual beach is, where there's no water, I'm gonna mix up that color so it's almost black. I think it is, could be black, and it just kind of curls around. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna have it curl around here, comes off the image just a little bit. I'm just gonna kind of create that. So this is sand that's just essentially totally dark now. And I'm even gonna come, so I'm gonna soften that edge just a little bit, just a little bit. So I'm cleaning my brush, knocking almost all the water off. And I'm just gonna kind of touch that where that edge, really just kind of softening it up a little bit. And then I'm gonna come back with even more intense black from the very edge of the paper. So I'm just gonna kind of touch some of this much more intense black out here. It's very wet right now, and I'm just gonna kind of let that fade into those spaces. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of bring some of that blue black back. It's more watered down, and there's that space. So it's wet sand is what it is, and um, it's another kind of wedge shape down here in the bottom. So I'm gonna be real conscious of where the reflection is. I don't want to paint over that. So I'm just gonna kind of paint the edge of that reflection, and then I'm just gonna kind of create that. This is a place where that water is running in on the edge of the sand, and so I'm just gonna kind of fill in that space. And this actually comes all the way around, and it's going to come over to the edge of the black, but I just need it to be a little bit lighter than that black. And because that black is so wet right now, I just have to be real careful not to touch it, or they'll end up mixing together. And I'm gonna, because right now where this edge meets, it's kind of rounded. So I'm just gonna kind of square that edge, not square it, but I am gonna kind of just paint some light streaks along that edge where it meets the sun. And I'm coming back now with a clean brush, and where that gray meets the black, I'm just gonna try to join them with that clean wet brush. While this is, it doesn't, you don't really see it very clearly on the image, but I'm just gonna kind of paint some horizontal streaks because that generally goes along with the way light reflects on the water. So I'm just kind of doing horizontal streaks all the way up. You can hardly see them. So in my mind, the spaces that are on the ocean that are kind of white, even though they're not white at all, but and our brain's telling us it's white. I'm just gonna create those. Really, they're like they're probably, they almost match our sky blue. Um, believe it or not. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna not paint in that area. So there's like a space here between where like a real wave is and where the wave is kind of broken on the shore. I'm gonna just kind of, with this blue gray that I've got, I'm just gonna paint that wedge in there. And now I'm gonna leave that edge, you can see, I think. So I've got really watered down blue black, blue gray, and I'm just gonna come in to create some of those streaks here. There's an area up here, kind of just below and to the left of the sun, where there's kind of a wave breaking. So I'm just gonna kind of, with a darker color there, I'm just gonna kind of create that guy. I'm going to use my fine line brush to create just a couple of those. They're real fine lines where the waves are kind of overlapping each other. This space in the bottom, kind of below where the reflection is, I need it should be darker, I think, than it is currently. Same thing with this side over here. I'm going to come back and paint this black again. I'm doing that thing right now where I really am trying to remove my brain from it and just study, like, what do I see? What do I see on the image? Like I was saying about how the my brain says that the white caps on those waves is white, but it's really not. That little bit of black that I just painted, I'm gonna, with a clean brush, just kind of feather the edge because I do want, there is like a little bit of a reflection in that part of the beach. I'm gonna create another dark space here that I see, and then I'm just gonna kind of fade out that edge. I'm gonna go over because I feel like the where the ocean is, the actual ocean, is a little bit too black right now. I'm gonna I'm gonna create like a blue wash, a dark blue wash, and I'm just gonna go over that part of the ocean with. This is definitely why um, I feel like this really is a study. Everything we're doing right now is really just kind of figuring out how do we, all these problems that we're encountering, how do we tackle them? How do I make some of these things look the way that I would like for them to look? Also got to do that thing that you should do at a certain point where you're just like, all right, I'm going to release this. I'm going to release this painting into the world. I'm not going to wrestle it anymore. I don't know who the winner is, but I'm just going over this black one more time because I feel like it should be just a little more intense. On the screen, it looks okay, kind of okay.
It looks great.
Thanks. This will be one of those pieces that I probably won't like, but I'll show it to people and they'll be like, "Oh, I love it." I'm gonna hair dry mine, and then I want to peel the tape, see what I end up with. Did you take these photos, Sandra?
I did.
They're awesome.
Thanks. That's in December.
This was in December.
Yeah. At Wild Dunes.
Did you guys fare okay?
Haven't taken the tape off yet.
Oh, Hannah left.
Oh. Sorry, Hannah. One of my friends from college just had a baby
Oh wow.
like an hour ago.